All right, everybody. So again, my name is Benjamin with the Ecomdash support team. I'm going to be guiding you through our Ecomdash Dropshipping Management 101 webinar here today. Throughout the process, if you have any questions, feel free to submit them towards the end of this. And right now we currently have it scheduled for about an hour. When we get to the end, if you have submitted any questions, I'll be able to take a look through those and see what we can get answered. Also, of course, at the end of this, if you do have any additional questions or need to rewatch it, we will be posting this on YouTube so that you go and rewatch it. And we'll also be happy to speak with you or answer any questions, within chat within our Ecomdash if you're one of our users, as well as email. You can always email us, support@ecomdash.com. So let's get this started here. First thing we're going to take a look at is just, kind of high-level overview and what we're going over today. So as part of the dropshipping process, we're going to go over adding a warehouse. In Ecomdash, we view your suppliers, vendors as warehouses, places that your products are stored. So that'll be kind of where we start things off. From there, we're going to go over how to set up an order feed or how to get your orders to your vendor for fulfillment, as well as how to receive tracking back in so that we can complete the order. Then we'll go over getting quantities, how to get your quantities from your vendor to Ecomdash. And then finally, we'll go over kind of the order flow, how it works with dropshipping with Ecomdash. Once an order comes in, how does it get reduced from a warehouse? Then how does it get passed? So we'll go through all these. Afterwards, we will send out a few guides that go along with this that I think will be pretty helpful. But again, if you do have any questions, feel free to submit them. I'd be happy to answer them there at the end. So we'll kind of kick things off here with adding a warehouse. So with Ecomdash, every user starts out with a standard My Warehouse, which is essentially your location. That's where you store it personally, your quantities, your inventory. But if you are drop shipping, that means you do have a supplier or a vendor that's storing product outside of your own location that you would like to route orders to and pull inventory in from. So there are three different types that you can set up. Standard is just going to be your normal, that's your own warehouse. That's your My Warehouse. Dropship, these just kind of give you a way to label it. They do also open up a few different features, but like Dropship, obviously, that's what you're going to set up if you do have a Dropship warehouse. What that kind of opens up for you is it allows you to, number one, see when you open up a warehouse, oh, this is a Dropship warehouse. And it also opens up the ability to define a cost at a warehouse level. So if you'd like to track the cost of a particular item at one dropshipper, you can do so. And we'll kind of demonstrate that throughout this presentation. We will be opening up Ecomdash itself to go through some different workflows. And then they have the option of 3PL or fulfillment center. So again, this time it's just something it's your own. You're just storing your items there. So let's pop into Ecomdash here and go over adding a warehouse. So those are three different types, but now, like I said, this is going to be very application-based, popping in, taking a look at actually adding in a warehouse. All right, so from the main dashboard, if you're in your Ecomdash dashboard, there are a few places you can add a warehouse. One of them is right from this page in the dropship and fulfillment section. You can see add or edit warehouse feeds. And then even if you've navigated away from the dashboard, you can also do it by going to settings, warehouse settings, and warehouse setup. So we'll pop there. As you can see, we've already set up a few warehouses. We have our My Warehouse, Amazon FBA, which is a form of drop shipping, but it is slightly different in the setup. So we will be having some more information on actually setting up FBA more specifically in a later webinar. And then we have our dropship warehouses. For this particular purpose, though, we're going to create a brand new warehouse here. So when you do create a brand new warehouse, there's a few fields it's going to ask you for. The only one that's really required is name. The rest of the stuff here is more for your own internal tracking. So an account number, if you want to have a reference to what your account number is for if you or an employee ever needs to contact the drop shipper, which we do have a place here where you can keep their phone number. But so this is more just kind of internal The addresses, that will be important if you have your own warehouse or something, and when you generate a shipping label, you want to pull the address, the ship from address from the warehouse rather than your company address. You want to make sure that's filled out. And then over here is where you can define the different types. So we'll set this one as dropship, and we'll call this webinar test. All right. So by simply setting up a warehouse, it's going to appear for all of your products. But the main thing that our users are looking for is when you're going to be drop shipping, and a big thing that Ecomdash can help you out with is automating that process so that you can, once it's all set up, you can really go kind of hands off and let it all run. So once you've got your warehouse and given a name, filled out any necessary information you want filled out here, the next big step is enabling warehouse integration. So if this is what you're going to check, if you're going to be doing drop shipping and you're wanting an automation, this enable warehouse integration is going to be very important, because that's what allows you to kind of set up the differences. So just to kind of show you, what happened when we created this, this warehouse for you, kind of as an example. So I'll go ahead and save, let this process and pull up, and then we'll actually let's go to inventory management. And we'll now be able to see if we click into one of our products here. So this is an existing product that was in my inventory. Once this loads up here for us, we'll be able to scroll to the bottom where we show you your various warehouses, and we'll see that we've got webinar test defined here. And because we've defined it as a drop shipping warehouse, it does give you this cost field. So that was kind of what I mentioned, where that drop down, well, it is more for you to just kind of internally segregate your different warehouses and what they are. By setting it as a drop shipping warehouse, it does give you that ability. So you can see here the My Warehouse was just set up as a standard, so it does not have a cost field for that, because you can already define cost at the product level. But if you are wanting to keep track of your cost when you purchase it from a drop shipper, this gives you the space too. So that's the process of adding a warehouse. It is very simple, but it is key, because in Ecomdash, kind of like I mentioned as we started this, we view vendors, suppliers, drop shippers, anywhere, fulfillment center, 3PL, any of those places where you have items being stored that are not your own, that's a warehouse. So you always want to set them up as a warehouse first. So that's step one. So we can pop back into this webinar here in a presentation. Second thing you want to do is, once you've set up a warehouse, what you want to do is go ahead and get it set up so that orders can be exported based on your choice. So when we check that box to enable warehouse integration, we're essentially, the next thing that we're going to go over is the different integration types. So there's two main ones when it comes to order export. That's FTP. We do also support SFTP and email. So we'll go over some of the differences here when we get that pulled up. But the key things for us to be able to export an order is you do need to define how you want the CSV file. So when we export it, we do export a CSV file. You need to define how that CSV file is organized. Part of that comes a little bit from speaking with your drop shipper to see how they want the columns in the file organized. So where they want, do they want order number in column 1? Do they want the SKUs ordered in column 2? So on and so forth. That is a process in which you do need to speak with them to be able to find out which format they prefer, so that you can correctly set it up in Ecomdash. So once you've gotten that information, if it's FTP as well, you do need to speak with them to find out the exact FTP URL that they want us to place the orders on, and if it's protected by a username and password, what that username and password is to access that site. And then you also need to set up a tracking import format. Tracking import format is applicable to those of you who set up your dropship warehouse as an FTP integration. It does not apply to email. I'll kind of show you why here in just a moment, but It is for FTP, and that allows your dropshipper to send us your tracking information so that we can mark the order complete in Ecomdash and then send that tracking information up to your storefront so your buyer can be alerted that the item has been shipped, and we'll be able to track it. So we're going to pop back into Ecomdash here. All right, so let's go into the warehouse. So once you've set up your warehouse, set up for your dropshipper, want to click into it. All right, so once you check that enable warehouse integration, here's where some of that information begins to where you do need to be checking with your dropshipper on what you need. So we have email, FTP hosted by Ecomdash, fulfillment by Amazon. In this case, again, we're kind of ignoring that one. We do have a very easy way of setting up an FBA warehouse, but that's a different process. So outside of FBA, email, FTP, and SFTP. So for email, it's pretty simple. Essentially what you do is you want to select email. So this allows us, when an order comes in for a dropship item, this allows us to email your supplier with a CSV file that has order information so that they can fulfill the order for you. So once you selected email, you can choose, do you want us to export orders to them every few minutes based on an interval, so every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, as an example, or specific times. So do you want us to always export at 10 a.m., 1 a.m., 1:30 a.m.? You can choose that here if you choose specific times, and you can choose multiple times. So if they are looking for orders only at a particular time, or if you only want to export once a day, we do have some users that do that and they take advantage of this feature. If you select intervals, this allows you to say, I want you to run an export to them every 10 minutes. Now, we won't export if there's nothing there, so they won't get an email every 10, 15 minutes. We'll only do it if there is an order with items, with drop-shipped items on it. But this allows you to define how often it's exported. This is going to be the same whether you choose FTP or email. You still define the different ways you want it exported. For email, you can come here and you simply want to include and type in your dropshipper's email. This is the email address that we will send the order to. So when they get the order, it's just going to be an email from your account, so whatever email address you have associated, and then it's going to have an attachment. That's the CSV file. So when you put your email address there, you can also say that you'd like to receive an email heads up once it is delivered, if you'd like to keep tabs on your order exports, so you can check that there. So that's kind of for email. Like I said, it's pretty simple setting it up. FTP is going to be a little different. So FTP external is really going to be the way you want to go, unless they are using SFTP. But if it's just normal FTP, you want to go FTP external. And you'll see the options that appeared here when you choose FTP external. So these two columns we've got here, the outbound URL, username and password, and the inbound URL, username and password, essentially what each of these both do different things. The outbound is outbound from Ecomdash. So what is the FTP site that your dropshipper wants us to place orders on? So this is kind of where you get into the needing to get information from your dropshipper. So you do need to check with them, which FTP URL do you want Ecomdash to place orders on? Once you get that from them, you will input that there. Again, if it is protected by username and password, which most of them are, you do need to fill that out here. The test button simply allows you to test that that URL is valid, that you've typed it in correctly, that they gave you the correct URL. It does not force an export. It doesn't necessarily confirm that it is the right URL. Clicking test just simply, again, allows us to say, okay, we can hit that URL. It is correct. Then the same thing over here, inbound. So inbound is where your dropshipper is going to be placing tracking information. So you need to find out from them the FTP URL where they will be placing tracking. Again, username and password. And then we offer the test. The include FBA sales orders option is here if you have orders coming in from FBA that you don't want fulfilled by FBA. So we do have that option if you need it. And then again, we have send an email when that file's been delivered to that FTP site. So again, outbound is where your dropshipper wants us to place orders. Inbound is where they will be placing tracking. So these are very key. So now you've gotten this filled out, whether you've chosen email or FTP. Now you need to define the file that we send over to them, because a lot of dropshippers need it formatted in a particular way. And there's also some fields that are going to be required from Ecomdash that you export to them so that they can give us back. So what you want to do once you have this is up here in the top right, you'll see two tabs, export and import format. Before we go there, we'll go ahead and save just to kind of lock in our selections there. And then export formatting is really just kind of defining the file that they need. So anytime you're creating an export or import format, if you're creating an export format in Ecomdash, it's telling Ecomdash how to organize the information when it's exported. Import format's saying this is how you need to read this file that I'm going to be uploading, or that a dropshipper is going to be uploading. So on this page, the most common file delimiter is comma. We do have plenty of dropshippers though that are going to ask for something other than comma, which you can choose here. So if they are asking for a file that is semicolon, tab, tilde, or vertical bar delimited, you would choose that here. So again, this page is going to be very important. Again, working with your dropshipper to find out what they need. So if they tell you it's comma separated, you can put that there. If for whatever reason on a sales order, we do provide you some other options here. So if they don't want comma on there, you can have that removed. If they ask for the file to be named something specific, so when we send it over, it's just going to be a timestamp of when it was exported. So it'd be, if it was right now here on the East Coast, it would be 3/14/18 to 2:23 p.m. But if they're asking for it for something specific, they want your order file to be called order file, you would type that in there. And then if you check this to use it as prefix, we will put that file name as well as a timestamp. So if they're asking, I need it named something specific, but I also want it to have an exact timestamp, you can check that box. If they're asking for it to have a particular file extension, you can put that there as well. So .txt instead of .csv, or any number of options. If they're asking for something particular, you can type that in there. And we have a few other options which are a little more advanced, but can kind of help you organize the information in different ways. But as far as, in most situations, what the next thing you need to do is you need to tell Ecomdash how to export this file, what information you want, and in what order, so that your dropshipper can receive it correctly. So sales order fields, basically this gives you all the fields from your sales order that your dropshipper may need. It's searchable, so if you're looking for a particular one, but you can come through here and add them in. So what you're adding here is the columns to a CSV file. The one that is very important is Ecomdash ID. Ecomdash ID is essentially our internal order number, and it's also the number that your dropshipper will need to pass back to us so that we can apply tracking to the correct order. So Ecomdash is an entire order, or you can use Ecomdash item ID. So if they supply tracking back not at the order level, but at the line level, then you would select Ecomdash item ID. But essentially this is the order number that you want to pass over to them. So if they said the file we needs to have order number in column 1, then you would select Ecomdash ID and click add field. And so you can see column number 1, that'll be where we'll place the Ecomdash item ID. The header on that file will say Ecomdash ID. If they want to receive it and take a look at it and have it called something different, like order number, you can put that in here. So essentially this would be if you want the column to be titled something different than the field here, which some of our dropshippers do. So like I said, Ecomdash ID is required because that is what they'll have to be able to pass us back to import tracking correctly. Everything else is totally up to you. Obviously, you know, there's a few things that are absolutely needed. SKU number, the quantity to ship, and where they're shipping to. So those are all here. And the order that you add these into, so the order you continue to do this, will keep adding on. So the first one you add, we'll place it in column 1. Next one you add, we'll place it into column 2. So you keep going. You know, the SKU number, the street that they need to ship it to, product SKU, quantity. So basically you just build this out to match what they need. If they need a file that has 8 columns and they tell you exactly what information you need, you can come here, you know, pick the ones that match up with what they need and add them. So you should have exactly 8 fields to match the 8 columns they need. So once you define that, again, this is telling Ecomdash how you want to export the order. The next thing that's very important is getting the tracking back. So as I mentioned, you can do tracking imports for FTP setups because that gives them a place to place tracking so that we can then pull it in. Email, you can't set up an import feed for tracking for an email simply because there's not a safe way to have them email us backtracking and have it automatically placed into the software, because that would require email attachments and things can get a little risky there. So when it comes to email, if you set up your warehouse here using email as the integration type, if you select that there, we'll export them the order, but they would need to email you back the tracking. At that point, you can find the order in Ecomdash, type in the tracking information, and the carrier and market is shipped. So again, the import format here, portion here, is really concerned with FTP. So what's important with import formats is essentially you'll speak with your dropshipper and they'll say, I'm going to give you a particular file with a particular amount of columns organized in a certain way. Ecomdash needs to be able to read that file, and it needs to know how to read the different information in the columns. So you have to build an import format to tell us how to read that file. So there's a few settings here. File includes header. So if they do have titles in row 1, you do want to check that so we import information correctly. Also, when we pull in tracking from the FTP site, by default, whenever we read the file, we'll change its name to complete so that we don't pull it in again. If your dropshipper doesn't want us to change the name, you just check that. We do have other checks and balances to ensure orders aren't pulled in multiple times. But if that's not checked, we will change the name to like -complete. So if you don't want that, you can select that there. So the easiest way to do this is really to just do an example. I've got an Excel file here that will say our test supplier has given me, and they said, you know, I went to them and I asked, can you support FTP? They said yes. They will be placing tracking information on an FTP URL. I've gotten that all filled out, and they've given me this sample file of what tracking looks like so that I can correctly map the information into Ecomdash. So in this test file, there are 5 columns. In column 1, they've got the order number, which because of how we set up our export, the order number will be the Ecomdash ID. The shipper, the tracking number, the ship date, estimated delivery date. One thing that's very key is your supplier must pass back Ecomdash ID or Ecomdash item ID, a shipper or carrier, and tracking number for us to be able to correctly mark the order as shipped and send the information up to your storefront. Anything else we can absolutely bring in if we have it available as an attribute, but it's not required. Those 3 are required. So if this is the particular file they've given us, order number, shipper, tracking number, ship date, and estimated delivery date, what we need to do is in Ecomdash, just like we did on the export format, you fill that out here. And again, the order you select them is the order you're going to tell us to read the file. So in column 1's our order number. We gave that to them as Ecomdash ID. We need to say, all right, Ecomdash, I want you to read column 1 of my dropshipper's file. That's the Ecomdash item or Ecomdash ID. So you add that there. Column 2 is the shipper. So in Ecomdash, we have that titled as carrier. Anytime you're dealing with an import format or export format, the headers don't really matter. They can be called something totally different. That's why it's so crucial that you place these fields in the correct spot, that if they have order number in column 1, that you make column 1 the Ecomdash item ID or Ecomdash ID. Same thing with carrier. So, going through here, column 3, we have it as tracking. Column 4 is the ship date. Column 5 is the estimated delivery date. And as you can see, there's various different fields that can be added here if you want to confirm the ship quantity. If they have an extra field on there that we don't support or can't import, you can put ignore there, because again, anytime you're importing a file into Ecomdash, the number of attributes or fields must match the number of columns in the file for us to be able to correctly read it. So if they did have something, some random column that you don't need, you can put the ignore field there. So once you've got that mapped, you can save, and basically your warehouse is now set up to correctly export orders and import tracking. So it's all about, number 1, setting up a warehouse, number 2, selecting your integration type. If it is email, putting their email address. If it's FTP, getting the URL information and the login information, and then defining the export format so that we can give them an order in a format they need, and import format so that we can accept the tracking file they give back to us. So that's the order section of a dropshipper and how to get it there. The next thing you want to do is you want to make sure most of our users who are dropshipping would like to know what their dropshipper has in stock, so that you don't have to worry about sending them an order for something they don't have in stock anymore. What you need to do for that is our next step here, which is importing quantities from a vendor. To import quantities, it's very similar as far as what we just did for a warehouse tracking import, except this time we're going to set up a specific import format. There are a few options to import quantity data from your vendor, such as HTTP, FTP, and email. In the import format, we'll also go over how to map an inventory file for upload. So just like we did for tracking, where they are giving us a file and we need to know how to read it, same thing with inventory. They're going to give us an inventory file with columns. You need to tell Ecomdash how to read that file so we can properly place information into the correct location. So what we'll go over now is pop back into Ecomdash and go over the steps of setting up an inventory import format. So if you start on the dashboard, kind of similar how there was with warehouses, how you can also do it here. There's also, for dropship and fulfillment, the ability to add or edit inventory feeds. So if you click that, that'll take us there. Also, at any time within the software, you can access it by going to Settings, Inventory Settings, Import Format. So when importing, import formats can be used to manually upload files. That we also provide, so it's very customized. We also provide some set ones that can be used for various tasks, such as tagging products, removing products, creating kits. What we want to go over is creating a brand new one for your dropshipper. So you found out from your dropshipper that they support, they provide an inventory file, and let's go over what we can do to get that created. So they're going to ask you a name. Again, we're going to go with webinar test. Okay, so what this opens up right away is the name, storefront dropdown, and warehouse. So again, kind of with that tracking import, if the file they're going to provide has a header on it, which most dropshippers do, you want to check that box. These two dropdowns are important for different reasons. So storefront dropdown is going to be if you want to apply information on that file to a particular listing attributes for a storefront. So if, let's say, a dropshipper you have actually provides eBay category IDs, if you're going to be assigning a storefront specific information, so essentially if you want to think about if you're going to be assigning listing information from this import from your dropshipper, you do have to select the storefront that applies to. So you would be able to select from your integrated storefronts. So if you set it to all, certain ones won't be able to be set, so storefront ones, so you do need to select that. And then for quantity, it is extremely important that you select your dropshipper's warehouse that you created, because if we're bringing the warehouse drop down here, all it is really concerned about is setting warehouse quantity. And to be able to pull in quantity and place it into the right place, you need to tell us which warehouse to place it into. So we did create our webinar test warehouse. We'll now select that as our warehouse here in this import format, since that's who it's for. Then just like you do on the warehouse page, there's enable file integration, which allows you to set up the various ways of communicating and importing this information automatically from your dropshipper. So here's integration interval, where you tell us how often you want us to read or try to import an inventory file. We offer that at 4 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, and 24 hours. Again, to match what type of file they're providing. If it's a CSV, you choose that, and then the other options as well, if the file's that way. There's a few sections over here that are extremely important when uploading a file from a dropshipper. So this one, if SKU matches existing inventory, you want Ecomdash to do what? So if there is a SKU on their file that you also have in your inventory, do you want us to ignore that, which would be perform no action? Do you want us to overwrite, which would say, okay, take the information in that file and apply it to the SKU I have in Ecomdash? So if you've got SKU A and that file has SKU A, and you want to import quantity for SKU A from that file, you want to set it to overwrite. If your supplier is providing you a file and the quantities aren't the exact numbers, but instead they're +1, -1, basically telling you to reduce or increase the levels that you previously had, then you would choose increase. But if they're providing you actual quantity, if they have 10 on hand and that file has 10, you want to go overwrite. Create new SKU product if SKU does not match. This one's important as well. So if you are selling every single item that your dropshipper has on their file, then you probably want to check that box, because that'll mean we won't be looking for only SKUs that match up with SKUs you have in your inventory. We'll bring in every SKU on that file. So if you are selling every item that they offer, you want to check that box so that anytime they add a new product, next time that feed runs, we'll bring it in. If you're only selling a select handful of those items and you don't want to be overwhelmed, you don't want your Ecomdash inventory to be just filled with items from your dropshipper, then you do not want to check that box, because again, if it is checked, any item on that file is coming through. And if you're only looking for updates for SKUs you already have, don't check that box. This one, the set quantity to 0 on products not on the file, this is just another handy feature that basically allows you to say, if they discontinue an item and your dropshipper, instead of just putting its quantity as 0 on the file, they remove that SKU from the file. By checking this box, we'll say, oh, that SKU is no longer on that file, set it to a quantity of 0 so that you're not selling an item that may be discontinued with them. And then just like for the warehouse, you're going to select an integration type, FTP, HTTP, or SFTP. HTTP can throw some people off. If there is an HTTP URL where they're placing the file, the URL must end in .csv. And by going to that URL, it must immediately trigger a download of the file. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that if that's what they offer, it must be set up that way. Otherwise, it cannot be imported correctly. And then FTP, very similar to how we set things up for the warehouse import and export. There's an inbound URL. If on that URL there's a particular file that you want to import, some of our dropshippers may have different product lines and they do different files. You can define that there. If there's only one file on there, you don't really need to fill that out as long as you've got the URL correct. And then again, access username and test, which we'll go over, which will confirm that the URL is a valid URL. So once you've got all that organized, the next big step is creating your import format by adding attributes to match the file that your supplier has. So again, we're just going to kind of do an example here. Let's say that this is an example of the file that your supplier has. So this is what they give you. You've already filled out the FTP information. Now you just need to map it. You need to figure out how to read this file. So as you can see on this file, there's 6 columns. That means that in your import format, you have to have 6 attributes. Again, to be able to properly import a file, your attribute number must match the exact number of columns so that we know where to place the data on that file. If it does not match, you will see errors and files will not be returned or imported correctly. So if they've given us this, where they have SKU number in column 1, name in column 2, quantity in column 3, UPC, MPN, and price. We need to get this info into Ecomdash. So basically, we'll just go through this here real quick, how to map this. So if they have SKU number in column 1, we'll click Add Attribute, and we can come here and look for SKU number. And there it is right here. So we have a few different ones, but for a standard product, SKU number. Click that green plus icon, and you'll see it was added there. Go ahead and save, make sure. One thing that comes to this when you are importing quantities, you do want to make sure that once you've set your warehouse here, that you do save to kind of lock in that you have set a warehouse. So we'll go ahead and save here real quick. And one thing to keep in mind, and I believe I mentioned this with the tracking import, the names of the columns, the headers, don't have to match exactly. So if what you call a SKU number, they call a part number, that's okay. All that matters is that you've selected the right attribute here to properly read what they have. Because essentially you're saying by having this in column 1 and space 1, whatever they have in column 1, that's my SKU number. So again, the titles don't really matter if they don't match up. So the second one, name. So those are 2 crucial ones to import a product. Create a product in Ecomdash. It's got to have SKU and it's got to have a name. So when we pop this one open, you can search name. And we'll see this here. Name is the name of your product in Ecomdash. Sold as name would be if you want to use that to set like its listing title. But for this, we'll just use it as the product name. Then we have quantity. So this one is where you want to make sure you choose the right attribute, because obviously quantity gets messed up. That's when oversells occur and all kinds of stuff you don't want. So when we come in here and search quantity, if we spell it correctly. All right, so you see if you just search the word quantity, there's a few different quantities here. What you want to do anytime you're uploading a file to set quantity, you want to use warehouse quantity. And it will not allow you to add this if you've not selected a warehouse. So you remember, we'll kind of pop this up. If you have not selected a warehouse here, if it was just set to all and you tried adding warehouse quantity, you would get something saying, please select a warehouse, at which point you would need to scroll up here, choose a warehouse, save, and then try adding warehouse quantity again. So we've added warehouse quantity. Again, checking on this file, we've got UPC in column 4. we have MPN or manufacturer part number in column 5. And column 6, we have price. So there's a few different price ones here. If you want to use the price they have on their file as your selling price, what you want to list that item at, then you want to choose the price field here. So choose that. If you want to set it as your cost, so if that's actually what your cost is of the item, then you can search for cost, but there are a few. So if you actually want it to be what's going to go out onto the listing, you want to choose price. And a good little helpful hint when you're looking at these is if you see the word product over here as the attribute type, that's mainly used in Ecomdash only. If you see global or listing, that means it's going to be used when you submit a listing to the storefront. So when you're coming here, some of these are just kind of internal map price, list price, but if you want it for it to actually going out there, you would choose price here. All right, so we've got that matching up. So as I mentioned, this is very crucial. Number have to match. One little helpful hint is if your supplier does not actually give you a quantity number, but they simply say in stock or something like that, we do have these rules, which next to warehouse quantity, you can click edit rule, and you could say add new, and you could do find and replace. So essentially, find the word in stock and replace it with a quantity of 10. And then you could add another one where you could say find and replace out of stock and replace it with a quantity of 0. So that's just a helpful little hint if they're supplying you something other than the actual quantity. So like a word in stock, out of stock, you can set those up there. All right, so that's as far as that's setting up your import format to import quantities. You know, if your supplier's got a whole bunch of fields, kind of like we did on that I mentioned to you on the tracking import, there is an ignore value. So, you know, if they have 50 columns, but you only need a few of those, there is ignore. So you can repeat use that attribute. You can use it multiple times. So you would just put that in place of a column that you don't need. But that's essentially it as far as getting your inventory set up. So once these are both running, every 4 hours we'll be pulling inventory into Ecomdash, updating your dropshipper warehouse with their levels, allowing us to sync those quantities out to your storefront. And then when somebody buys it, it's going to come into Ecomdash, and if it comes in and reduces from that warehouse, we'll route it out to them. So kind of to wrap things up here, the final little thing that we want to go over is going to be how the workflow works. So when you're drop shipping, how does it work? You know, what is the flow of these things? So we're going to pop back into Ecomdash here for one last time and just kind of go over, you know, what happens. You know, how does it work? So you've gotten your warehouse set up, you've gotten your import format, quantities are being updated, you know, things are going well. Basically what's going to happen is, and we can use one of these SKUs as an example. So while this is loading up here, let's say we use SKU 0000-12126. And let's say this has 50 in stock. All right, so somebody goes out to your storefront online and they find this travel hiking backpack waterproof outdoor trekking bag and they order it. With Ecomdash, we check your storefronts about every 5 minutes for new orders. If an order comes in for that item and comes into Ecomdash, what's going to happen is behind the scenes, we are going to check the warehouse priorities you have defined here. So basically this tells us the way it's currently set up that when an order is placed for this item, you want us to check FBA for quantity first. If it has quantity, route the order there. If it's out, roll down to my warehouse, route the order there if it has stock. If a warehouse in the priority doesn't, we will just roll to the next one. So for this product, let's say it's going to be we're going to drop ship this item, and we always want it, we're never really going to have any in stock. We want it always to go to our webinar test supplier. So we're going to change the warehouse priority to 1. So this is very important when setting up a drop shipper, that you do organize this correctly. If you want the item, because down here is basically telling us where you want it to be reduced from first. So you'll see now we've got webinar test in position 1. So that order was placed on the storefront. It came into Ecomdash, and it checked this page here, and it said, all right, what is the highest priority warehouse that has stock? That's the warehouse we're gonna allocate this to. So when it came in, it found webinar test was priority 1, and it has a stock of 50, so it's in stock. So it's gonna allocate the order to webinar test. So from there, when an order comes in, it's going to sit in your paid ready to ship page. If you have set it up to export an order every 10 minutes or at a certain time, the order will sit in this page until that export runs. As soon as that export runs, sending it to your drop shipper for fulfillment, it'll actually automatically create a shipping order in Ecomdash and will move it out of paid ready to ship. So again, as soon as it exports, it'll move away from paid ready to ship, and it will then go to the unshipped orders page, where it will sit here and wait for tracking. If you've set your warehouse up as an email exporter, remember they can't give us tracking back automatically. So if we sent them an email with a CSV file attached for the order, they're going to receive it, they'll fulfill it. They can then email you back the tracking, and you would just need to come into this page, type in the tracking information, and mark it as shipped so that we can send that information up to your storefront. If you have it set up as an FTP, they will be able to give us tracking back if you've set up your tracking import correctly. As soon as they give us tracking back, we'll import it. It will show up here, we'll automatically fill it, and if every item is on there, so if you're using Ecomdash ID, remember that is required, and that's used to define tracking for the whole order, while Ecomdash item ID is defined at the line level if they ship it by line rather than by order. If they give us the item ID that says whole order shipped, it's good to go, we will mark it as shipped, complete the order, and send tracking up to your storefront. If they're passing in item ID, we'll keep it open until they mark each line shipped. Once it's shipped, again, mark it complete, send tracking information up to your storefront. So that's kind of the entire workflow. We're basically, every few hours, we're checking their FTP site for quantity, importing any quantity changes, syncing those quantity changes out to your storefront. Once somebody orders it, it's going to come into Ecomdash. As long as you have your priority set up correctly to reduce from that warehouse, again, essentially what we look at is what is the highest priority with stock. So if we hit that one, it'll be to your dropshipper's warehouse is the first warehouse we find that has stock. It'll be allocated there within your interval or specific time. It'll be exported. We'll wait for tracking. Once they give it back, it'll be posted up there. So in terms of Dropshipping 101, that's really the gist of it. But thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate it. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.